Papillon, Home Depot, AT&T, Walmart, Wendy, Burger King, McDonald's, Little C- Little Caesar, Starbucks Coffee, Costco Wholesale, Gold Star Member, Dunkin' Donuts, Yakini Box, Paris City, Pizza Hut, Verizon, Dorian Roll, Macy's, and JCPenney. Subway, Pepsi, Facebook, YouTube, Conflict.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the following program. I am your host, Joe Neerman, aka Good Lawgic. I am here for you tonight. I'm not telling you what will happen. I'm telling you what could happen. That's what I'm doing. I'm telling you what could happen tonight. Because I'll tell you that what we have seen today, seeing the director of national intelligence coming out and fingering Barack Obama, specifically a former president, and referring him to the DOJ for indictment, only is going to make the Epstein screams from the Democrats. All of a sudden, it's like they're shrill. We have to hear all about Epstein. We got to hear all about Epstein now. Oh, we got to hear about Epstein. Don't talk about Barack. Talk about Epstein. You have to talk about it. Stop talking about Barack. Don't do it. Oh, they are freaking out. And for good reason. For good reason. I'm going to tell you right now, I've heard all sorts of different charges that could be thrown at Barack Obama. What I am going to be laying out is what I think is the most effective charge that should be thrown at not simply Barack Obama, but Brennan, Comey, Clapper, and probably Hillary while we're at it. No reason to keep her out. All of this surrounded around Hillary. And I've seen folks say statute of limitations, all that other stuff that they're trying to say, no, it's too late. You can't get him on these crimes. You can't get. No, I don't think that's going to help him. I don't think that's going to help. I don't think so. I don't. I'm going to walk you through it. And why it is, I think, that the statute of limitations, I'm going to show you the evidence that the statute of limitations isn't going to help save these folks, is not going to help save them. Now, how long we have to wait until we actually see indictments drop? That'll probably be a couple of months. Who will be named in those indictments? That will be an interesting thing to see. Will Pam Bondi actually go ahead and indict Barack Obama himself? I don't know. Which jurisdiction will be brought in? These are questions, everyone. Because if you bring these, I'll tell you right now, you bring these charges in Washington, D.C. If you bring them in D.C., just don't. You're wasting everyone's time. They will be dismissed. They'll be dismissed. Everything's just gonna vanish like smoke. Certainly, Barack Obama charges would be dismissed instantly. Oh my God, instantly those would evaporate. But what we'd probably see all the other charges against, the BCC, Brennan, Clapper, Comey. We'll probably see those fall apart in short order also, if in fact it's in DC. But I agree. My favorite would be if somehow we could end up back in front of Judge Eileen Cannon. It's possible. It's possible. It is possible. We should not forget the Hussein and Barack Hussein Obama. Everyone forgot about the Hussein. Everyone forgot. I never forgot about the Hussein. I never forgot about it at all. There's a lot for us to look at and a lot for us to break down. I really want to go through. Let's listen to what Tulsi said, and I'm going to break down for you how this actually manifests as charges, how this potentially could manifest as charges. I think that's the best way that I can do this, because you all could watch this on your own. You all could watch this on your own without me. I'm always very, very fixated on what is my value add. So I'm going to tell you up front what my value add is. I'm going to give you legal perspective as we're watching Tulsi to try and say, yeah, this could be that. There you go. This could support that. I'm also going to, excuse me, I'm going to show you the evidence as to why it is the statute of limitations and other charges. I don't think it's going to be availing at the end of the day. I don't think. Look, some of these charges may fall off because of statute of limitations. That's true. That's possible for some of them. But we're going to go through the different charges. In fact, I'll start off with this. I'll give you this out of the gate. If you ask me what the most effective charge you can bring here against Hillary, Barack, Brennan, Comey, Clapper, it is RICO. That's right. I'm going with RICO. I think you can bring a RICO case against all of these folks and probably a dozen more. Now, I will say this strategically, and obviously whoever has the red well, if you have the red well, you have a better chance of understanding the best legal strategy to prosecute a particular case or to defend the case. Ron Coleman is the one who says, you have to go by if you don't have the red well, you don't know the best legal strategy. Because he's right. There's always pitfalls that you and I don't know about, that the people who actually have the file on the case have access to information that you and I are not going to know, and that would certainly have a significant impact on your legal strategy for the most part. Certainly with respect to what charges you bring and things of that nature. So I can understand that, that whatever I'm laying out for you is unlikely to nail it spot on. I hope to get a couple of things right. It's a good chance. I'm going to go with all the good ones. But I'm going to be watching with you. Part of what we're going to be doing tonight is I'm going to be watching with you Tulsi Gabbard's press conference today, including some of the questions that were asked afterwards, and then I'm going to be spelling out with you and pausing along the way, saying, so this could lead to this charge, and try and walk you through potential predicates for RICO, as well as other charges that may not be predicates for RICO, because sometimes RICO has a certain list. You have to sort of be working in the fraud realm specifically if you want to actually bring it for RICO. So, okay. With that, I think that's a good background as to how I plan on doing this show tonight and what I plan on bringing to you. So with that, that's not what I wanted. This is my show here. With that, let me just get this out of the way. If Obama goes to trial, we may finally get cameras in a federal court. No way the nation doesn't demand the right to watch this. I don't think we will. And then I'm going to have to decide, am I going down to whatever jurisdiction it's in? If it's in D.C., it won't make it to trial if it's in D.C. There's no way it makes it to trial. And we got to talk also, I'm going to have to review with you, and I'm probably going to end up doing this a lot over the next several months, reviewing with you Trump v. USA, especially when we know more specifics about particular actions he took and how those actions should be classified and whether it seems reasonable. I'm probably going to end up classifying as seems to my opinion, clearly immunized by his presidential authority. Like, this is core constitutional. I'll look at and I'll try to assess what things seem clearly to be not immunized. And then the biggest bucket is going to be things that sort of fall sometimes in, sometimes out. And it really may depend statement to statement in the same conversation as to whether or not those acts are considered official acts and would start with a presumption of immunity. So That's what I got. That's what I plan on doing for you all here. Let me get this out of the way here. Why don't I see? Let me pull this up. I don't know what I did with that particular tab, but it should be right. It should be right here. There it is. All right.
White House to the families, the victims in the brutal murder case in Idaho, who were sharing their heart-wrenching stories about their loved ones before the court today and addressing the evil killer who took 4 precious souls. We are so sorry.
Let's get past this part of it and move on to Tulsi.
Suggesting otherwise. Why? To sabotage the incoming president.
We'll go back a little bit.
This is truly one of the great. Thanks to the declassification of documents by Director Gabbard, the truth has finally come to light. And this truth vindicates President Trump, his family, and his many allies and associates who were smeared with defamatory lies. President Trump was right from the beginning about all of this, and we are grateful that justice can be served. Now, we have even more damning evidence implicating those who tried to sabotage a duly elected president and did grave material harm to our republic. Thanks to additional important work done by CIA Director Ratcliffe, Committee Chairman Rick Crawford over the past few months, a newly declassified 2020 report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which DNI Director Gabbard has declassified, found that the intel community did not have any direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016. And in fact, Russia was actively preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. But at the
I'm gonna say this. I just gotta get this out of the way. You're all gonna see, for as long as she has the patience to not rip her own hair out, you're likely, if you're in the chat here, to see this individual, Robin Dopp, who's a long time listener of this show, loves to come on whenever she thinks there's gonna be something politically charged, whether it's very strongly pro-Trump, very strongly against Trump. So I'm not surprised that she decides to bestow us with her presence tonight. I appreciate her coming by. Good to see you, Robin. And I'll tell you that she's very triggered by this entire thing. Many times she's told me how wrong I am, and she's going to tell me how wrong I am all night tonight. You guys should, but she actually speaks respectfully, and I welcome her coming in here. I'm going to urge all of you to treat her with respect. I'm simply going to point out to you, Robin, I might call on you once or twice more, but I'm not going to make the whole show about you. Don't worry about that. But I will point out to you that one thing that came out with this declassified report is the Intelligence Committee never thought for a second that Russia was pro-Trump, that they wanted Trump in there. If anything, our own Intelligence Committee, the assessments made by Brennan, Clapper, Comey, and their respective teams was that, if anything, they had the goods in order to help compromise Hillary Clinton, who they anticipated would win. And if you don't think that defeats so many different narratives that you yourself have foisted on me in my chat over the last 3 years, I'm sorry. I've heard you say it, that Russia wanted Trump. That's something the left has been screaming forever. It's Russia wanted Trump, which never made any sense to me. Never made any sense, because they'd much rather have a weak and an effective leader like Hillary Clinton than Trump. But everyone was so convinced, oh, Putin loves Trump. He wants Trump in power. Putin loves Trump. Then he did nothing for the 4 years Trump was in power and basically acted like a scolded schoolboy while Trump was in power, compared to the way he acted when Barack was letting the world get set on fire, or when Biden basically routinely displayed his own incompetence, which basically left the wheels go flying off the cart there for the rest of the world, because they know, well, the big bad potential police agency of the United States of America is paper tiger. So yeah, they didn't want Trump. It never made any sense. And in fact, they even had good reason to want Hillary because they felt that she was potentially compromised. They felt that they actually had ways of harming America more if, in fact, Hillary would have, God forbid, won the 2016 election. So,
unusual direction of Barack Obama at the time, the intel community published implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise. Why? To sabotage the incoming president. This is truly one of the greatest political scandals in American history. And reporters at legacy outlets, some of which are sitting in this room today, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, were ridiculously awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their perpetuation of this hoax. It's well past time for those awards to be stripped from the journalists who receive them. It is not journalism to propagate political disinformation in service of the Democrat Party and those in the intelligence community who hand over out of context and fake intelligence to push a false political narrative. I will now pass it over to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to speak more about all of this, and then we will open it up for questions afterwards. Tulsi, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. At President Trump's direction and with the support and coordination with the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, today we've released a declassified oversight majority staff that was produced in September of 2020.
now I want to pause here and share with you. I'm going to share with you here the report that she's talking about. That's not it. This is the declassified report here. She's referring specifically to this report. It's a 46-page report, which, get rid of that. It's a 46-page report which was created by the House Select Committee. The chairman of that committee was an individual by the name of Adam Schiff. So they put together this report to try to figure out what happened in 2016, 2017. What happened with the whole election thing? This is in September of 2020, before the election. So just to get your brain in the right frame of reference, we're in the middle of COVID, and they put out this report and they sealed it, saying no one can see this report. Well, the report has now been unsealed, so we can go through it, and there's interesting things you find in this report. For example, what do I mean by interesting things? Well, and understand it's going to be tilted. The report itself you have a majority Democratic Congress here, which is why the chairman is a Democrat. And some of the things that they find in here, this is not Trump's team putting this together. This is a congressional subcommittee that is putting this together and doing their findings and then sealing it so that no one can know about this. So Adam Schiff is the guy who basically said, oh, this has to be sealed. And in here, we find various things where they're trying to figure out, based on what our intelligence communities were saying in 2016, what was known to the Obama administration down the stretch heading into the 2016 election and afterwards. And some of the findings that they made are really kind of astonishing. Like the fact that they actually used the Steele report to make some of their assessments. They relied on the Steele report in order to make many of their assessments, like the fact that they felt that they could compromise Hillary Clinton, that there was issues that with Hillary, that if in fact she was to win, and one of the things that's frustrating about this report is that it's not searchable because of the way it's been uploaded. But that what they basically said was that things that they have high confidence about and what we're going to learn is that they had one perspective about what was really going on, and then they would say things exactly the opposite and express high confidence. And that Brennan himself was basically suppressing legitimate intel and relying on the Steele dossier that everyone knew was hot garbage. and promoting the Steele dossier and the reports and the findings of the Steele dossier as valid and more significant than his own intelligence agents, who were basically like, why are you even reading that? It's crap.
The stunning revelations that we are releasing today should be of concern to every American. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic and American voters having faith that the votes cast will count. There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though it were true. It wasn't. The report that we released today shows in great detail how they carried.
I promise to share with you some of my legal perspectives here. That would be a conspiracy to commit fraud. And you got 18 USC 371. There's a whole bunch of statutes that you have, but this is a conspiracy to commit fraud. And okay, that's potentially something that's workable under RICO, because when it comes to fraud, fraud is one of the bases to bring a RICO charge. So that would be a conspiracy to basically defraud the American people. The different statutes that we're looking at here, that would include potentially 18 USC 371, to the extent that there's false statements that are being made to any sort of government officials or to any sort of police agencies, in theory, even made by the director himself, where he's saying that this is legitimate, even though everyone knows it's not. That could be 18 USC 1001. If they're emailing each other, and they're basically describing, what they're going to be telling each other and how they should handle things in order to perpetuate that fraud, that's technically 18 USC 1343, which is wire fraud. Because wire fraud, while it sounds like it has to do with, transfers of money, if you email other people, that is considered that's considered potentially wire fraud. These are all the different statutes that they're walking all over. Then you have honest services fraud, 18 USC 1346. Not to mention one of their favorites after January 6th, which is obstruction, 18 USC 1512.
Read this out. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration. We're here today because the American people deserve the truth, they deserve accountability, and they deserve justice. The records we released on Friday that were ODNI records, Senator Chuck Grassley's release on Monday of what is known as the Clinton Annex, which was an appendix to the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General's 2018 report, as well as the House Intelligence Committee's majority oversight report that we're releasing today, all come back to and confirm the same report. There was a gross politicization and manipulation of intelligence by the Obama administration intended to delegitimize President Trump even before he was inaugurated, ultimately usurping the will of the American people. I'm going to go over the key findings from the House Intelligence report, which investigated the claims that were made by an intelligence community assessment ordered by President Obama and published in January of 2017. First, Putin's principal interests relating to the 2016 election were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process, not show any preference of a certain candidate.
These are findings that were made by the intelligence community, Obama's intelligence community, that were not expressed by the intelligence community, but this is what the House Select Committee said. This is what they found. This is what we saw that they actually thought.
In fact, this report shows Putin held back leaking held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency.
So to explain what she's saying here, in October 2016, Putin is convinced Hillary's going to win. And that he's like, we have a lot of damning information about her that would make her look terrible, like that she's moody and she has all these different, she's on all these different medications, and we have all these things to help weaken her. We'd rather use this to subvert her after she gets elected than to inform and drop that on the American public now. So that's essentially what that was Putin's actual game plan. Not that because he wants to subvert our democratic processes in general, and if he can make Americans recognize how weak a leader and how unhinged Hillary actually is, that would actually help further those objectives.
In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered.
I'm just going to ask, do you guys want me to show you a montage of how unhinged Hillary looked? I don't know if that's the sort of thing you guys would like. Is that let me see. Is that something you guys would have an interest in? If you can thumb up if you think that hit the like if you think that if you want me to share a quick short 2-minute montage of just how unhinged she is, because I think I got that here somewhere that I can share with you all. I just don't want to burden you all with something that you really don't want to see. So I don't know. We'll I'm seeing some mixed here. People are not sure if they really want it. I don't know. Auto pen and mass invasion is Obama and all that stuff. All right. I'm seeing some thumbs. I'm seeing. All right. Let's just take a quick look. Let's take a quick look at unhinged Hillary. 3 minutes of unhinged Hillary. The election, and this is from the report. What you see here on the left are highlighted parts of the report, which include that the election was far less damaging to Secretary Clinton than those Putin chose not to leak. As of September 2016, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service had Democratic DNC information that President Obama and party leaders found the state of Secretary Clinton's health to be extraordinarily alarming and felt it could have serious negative impact on her election prospects. The SVR possessed DNC communications that Clinton was suffering from intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that she was placed on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. In addition, she has type 2 diabetes, heart disease, deep vein thrombosis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It must be part of her deal with Satan that she's still alive today. And the SVR possessed a campaign email discussing a plan approved by Secretary Clinton to leak Putin and Russian hackers to candidate Trump in order to distract the American public from the Clinton email server scandal. Let's take a look at how unhinged she can look.
Did you talk about vice presidential?
Shove her in there. Shove her in. Shove her inside.
Represent inmates. Excuse me. Too much to say. That's been wow. Thank you, Hazel. That's been part of my mission. And representing poor people through the Legal Services Corporation. It was about making people's lives better. And it taught me that even if you're young and you don't have a powerful job, if you work at it, you stick with it, you can make a difference.
Spoiler alert, she's still breathing by the end of this clip. All right.
You know,
Stunning and brave. Stunning and brave. That's what I'm thinking as I'm watching this.
Thank you.
So let's get back to Hillary. To Tulsi.
John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary Clinton until after her potential and likely victory. The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed...
That sounds like pay for... So basically, we knew that she was engaging in pay for play with people who were donating to her. This is what we avoided.
The patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. Then CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community mischaracterized intelligence and relied on dubious substandard sources to create a contrived false narrative that Putin developed a quote-unquote clear preference for Trump. Brennan and the IC misled lawmakers by referencing the debunked Steele dossier to assess quote-unquote Russia's plans and intentions, falsely suggesting that this dossier had intelligence value when he knew that it was discredited. The intelligence community excluded...
So this is a very important part. This is a critical part I don't want any of you to miss. So this is why I want to focus on what she just said here, because this is going to become very relevant with respect to helping to defeat the statute of limitations issues in a potential RICO charge. What she just said is that the report from the House Select Committee indicates that John Brennan was basically vetoing people who wanted to outright reject the Steele dossier and saying no, that's something we need to actually place a premium on. So that is what the House Select Committee was saying, that he was relying on the Steele dossier. The reason that's very, very, very important is because here is John Brennan testifying within the past 5 years in front of Congress.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
They're talking about the Steele dossier here.
Because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
Did the CIA rely on it?
Uh-oh. Oh, no. That's not good. That's not good at all. No, no, no.
You, sir, are a liar. Liar. Your pants are on fire.
And more significantly than his pants just being on fire is the fact that that is perjury. It's a crime, which would be within the past 5 years. And that helps relate back to all the people charged with RICO working together with Brennan, because this is his way of trying to cover up the fraud that they perpetrated on the American people. So that's an overt illegal act designed, while that itself cannot serve as a predicate, perjury is not a predicate for RICO, it is something that can help relate back to show continuing crimes that will now let us go up to 10 years back and see the other things that they did commit within the last 10 years. That statement right there, which, by the way, he could go to jail simply for that statement alone for lying to Congress. But Brennan is a big fish, but he's not the one we're trying to reel in now. Trust me. If you told Democrats that from this whole breaking scandal, the only thing that came out of it was John Brennan getting convicted of perjury, they'd be like, phew. They would be ecstatic with that. No. What that crime does is it enables us to basically relate back 5 years before that. That enables us to go back and see, hey, we have crimes that have happened within the last 10 years. And here's some of your crimes happening within 5 years. And you can look back to the crimes to the RICO predicates up to 10 years. So you need to be able to get back to that period. And by the furthering of the RICO acts, here's your overt illegal activity that's happened in the past 5 years. And presto, we can now look at what happened in 2016. Thank you, John Brennan, you big fat stinking liar. That's why that is very significant in my personal opinion. Based on everything I've seen so far about the opportunity to press forward on a RICO charge. But let's continue with Tulsi's phenomenal statement that she gave today. Oh, what did you got here? Hillary's demon was trying to get out, and she wouldn't let. Demon was trying to get out. Don't know what demon did, but Satan isn't happy. Cash is sitting there watching Testament. I've caught Hillary's thing now. Gosh, sorry about that.
Significant intelligence and ignored or selectively quoted reliable intelligence that contradicted the intelligence community assessment's key findings on Putin's alleged support for Trump, including this intelligence reporting, would have exposed the ICA's claim as implausible, if not ridiculous. The intelligence community assessment omitted reliably sourced information, such as how some Russian intelligence officials were, quote unquote, planning for candidate Hillary Clinton's victory, while others assessed neither Trump nor Clinton would respect Russia's interests. As was reflected in the ODNI documents that we released on Friday, multiple intelligence community assessments released in the months leading up to the November 2016 election concluded that
I'm going to be talking about the executive privilege a little bit here. We'll be talking about that.
Russia had neither the intent nor capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election. On December 5th of 2016, the FBI and ODNI gave the House Intelligence Committee its first post-election classified briefing, in which there was no mention of Putin aspiring to elect Trump by either agency. The presidential daily brief, drafted on December 8th of 2016, stated that no Russian or criminal actors impacted vote counts. This document was pulled just hours before it was to be published due to quote unquote new guidance. If it had been published, it would have been briefed to both President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump. On December 9th, 2016, a National Security Council meeting was called to gather President Obama's senior national security officials, which included CIA Director Brennan, then Obama DNI James Clapper, Susan Rice, and others. Following that secret meeting, DNI Clapper's assistant sent an email to the intelligence community with the subject line, POTUS tasking on Russia election meddling, tasking ODNI leaders to create a new assessment per the president's request. The House Intelligence Committee oversight report that we released today reveals that, quote, unlike routine intelligence community analysis, the intelligence community assessment was a high-profile product ordered by the president, President Obama. It directed senior intelligence community agency heads and created an intelligence community assessment limited to just 5 analysts using one principal drafter. This is not something that occurs in the normal path of producing an intelligence community assessment that reflects the views across the intelligence community.
And that is key. That is very, very important. I'm going to make myself big here so I can find this later. Let's take a moment to assess Trump v. USA as it's relevant here, because we're talking about prospective presidential immunity. To the extent that any actions that he's taking here, Obama specifically, the others obviously don't share his immunity, but we're talking about, can we really get an indictment and potential conviction on Obama? So let's look at the particular steps that she just mentioned here and now, which is the unorthodox and unusual style as to what Obama did with his presidential daily briefings. He has absolute immunity for any of his core functions under the Constitution, the core functions. So to the extent that he's dealing with international community, I would tell you right now, he has absolute privilege. Doesn't matter what he did. Doesn't matter how terrible what he did was. If he went to different countries and told them, hey, I want you to give Trump a hard time, he has absolute immunity. That's just the reality. You might hate it. You might think that's crazy. We're not going to get into the philosophy underpinning it. I'm just telling you what the law is under Trump v. USA. That's for his core functions. Stuff that has nothing to do with his core functions, there's no immunity. But then there's this broad ambit of things that presidents do, which is not really called for under the Constitution, but it certainly is viewed as part of their official duties. And to the extent that he's engaging in official duties, those official duties start with a presumption of immunity, a rebuttable presumption of immunity. And the only way, so once something gets classified as being this is an official act, now it starts with, we're going to assume, and unless under Blasingame, which is a different case that came out a year earlier, which said that you can't, that to the extent that this rebuttable presumption of immunity does not apply to things that are manifestly outside what he's supposed to be doing. But that you also cannot look to his motives to try and assess that. Can't use his motives. So what does that mean? How would that translate? And everyone's had that question. How would that translate? Well, I think what our fine director of national intelligence just said perhaps gave us a perfect example of something manifestly outside of what he's supposed to be doing. Because in general, I think you and I and everyone would in general agree that these presidential daily briefings, we have meetings between the intelligence community and the president. That's not probably laid out specifically anywhere in the Constitution, but it does seem like something that he's got to do, right? He's got to be informed in order to actually make healthy decisions. So I think you and I and everyone would generally agree that that sort of would be classified as an official act. I think it's a fairly unreasonable position to say that a meeting regarding presidential daily briefing is not an official act. I think that's kind of ridiculous. My personal perspective is that take would be kind of ridiculous. But so since it's an official act, he would start with a rebuttable presumption of immunity. We presume he has immunity for what he's doing in his presidential daily briefings. How would you defeat that? How would you rebut it? You would rebut it by saying this is manifestly something he's not supposed to be doing. When she pointed out just now that this is something that is outside the normal course of doing things, that is a good step in the direction of saying it's manifestly wrong. There's something manifestly wrong here. Now, it depends on what he's doing. You know, people might go outside the normal course of chain of events, and that would not be something, it's not doing something. But if that would not necessarily be something which would be manifestly wrong. It would just be unusual, but not wrong per se. But when he is now doing this, and he understands that these presidential daily briefings are going to be shared not just with him, but incoming President-elect Donald Trump. And he goes outside the normal parameters and does something very different during the late stage when he's a lame duck. And he understands that these daily briefings are arguably more important for that guy than they are for me, because he's going to be dealing with this for the next 4 years. And he goes out of his way to try and change the way things are done and try and keep information from Donald Trump. That is trying, in my opinion, that is manifestly wrong. So even though it's normally an official act, meeting with his intelligence community, I would respectfully submit that all the steps he's taking there behind the scenes, saying, I want you to generate a new report. I want you to focus on all the ways Russia was interfering and was trying to upset democracy in this entire process. And I want you to take this stuff out of the report that Donald Trump's going to see so that he never sees it. These are steps and actions which you have to ask yourself, what possible, forget about his motivation, what possible good could come out of that? What possible good could come out of making sure that the real information I'm getting now has a whole different slant when it's being viewed by my replacement? It requires such audacity. It requires such hubris. And to me, that is something that could qualify as manifestly standing on its own an intentional wrongful act that he is undertaking while engaging in an official act. What the court would qualify or likely qualify as an official act. So under Blasingame, even though he's starting with a presumption of immunity for those acts, that doesn't mean he would retain that immunity, and that I would argue, certainly if I was presenting this case on behalf of the DOJ, that boom, right there, when he takes an unusual process, to purposefully keep Trump in the dark about very important information that he's going to need to have in order to properly deal with Russia down the road, right? It's not simply a matter of like, what does he know about the election? which that alone is something he should know, so he can address it properly for upcoming elections that would happen during the course of the Trump administration. But it's also a matter of he's going to hit part of Trump's constitutional duties is to deal with foreign countries. That is what his primary role is. And you are crippling his ability to actually come to proper decisions when you tell your own intelligence committee, I'm going to outside without Trump's never going to know this, but I'm telling you, change up the whole information that you have and present it a whole different way. Now Trump sees that and is likely going to draw different conclusions about how to deal with Russia than he would have if he actually got, the accurate information. So that is something that I think is potentially leading towards him being part of this fraud and conspiracy that he's defrauding the United States of America under 18 U.S.C. 371. He's defrauding us of our vote, and he is part of this conspiracy here. This, and I would say racketeering, is that it's basically trying to defraud all of us. That is, to my mind, one of the most critical moments here. And in fact, you can even say that to the extent that he took steps and had conversations outside of daily press briefings and said, hey, I want you to tailor things this way, that you're completely 180 degrees the opposite of the way the information should be presented, that would no longer potentially be an official act. That becomes something, because if you're arguing from the position of the prosecution here, you would basically be saying that's not an official act. While having a daily press briefing is an official act, the steps he does where he basically has a conversation with Clapper or with Brennan, says, I want you to do this, blah, 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 that way, that's not an official act. That's not something he's supposed to be doing there. So, but even if it would be an official act, I would say that on the Blasingame, that is manifestly a wrongful act. And accordingly, the presumption of immunity is properly rebutted. But let's hear more. Let's hear more from Tulsi. Intelligence put Obama in. Obama reciprocated with the green light. I don't think intelligence put him in. I'm not sure what you mean by intelligence putting him in. He won in a landslide, at least in 2008. I think his election victories were genuine. I don't question legitimacy of the outcome of the election, the presidential election in 2008 or 2012. So I'm not sure if that's what you're questioning. The PDB would also have been shared with General Flynn. This is true. This is true. Doesn't a president get to tell his departments, no, you're wrong, do what I say? It's a fair question. But what is that based on? In other words, how would he, in order for them to say the exact opposite of what they were telling him? So now I want you to present information this way? Why? What is the objective of creating a presidential daily briefing? Meaning, he obviously knew what's the point here that they're trying to get at is he knew what the results were and said, I want you to present something different that Trump is going to see. So he can tell them, I want you to focus on this over here. In fact, I myself have made the very point, for example, with the DOJ, that it's Trump's DOJ, and he can have them focus on prosecuting crimes primarily in this area and spending less of their energies prosecuting in that area. And that would be further into the agenda that he was elected to enact. And I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that actually makes sense. But the nature of presenting information and relying on information that was not credible, having Brennan rely on information that's not credible, and disregard more credible information, what possible function could that be serving that's beneficial to anyone? Something that's been discredited, and here's the smoking gun to show that they know it's wrongful. Because if they thought that relying on the Steele dossier was the right way to go, was a natural, and that's the smartest or a logical way to go, then James Brennan doesn't perjure himself when he's questioned by Gowdy. He would just say, yeah, we relied on it. That's the right way to go. The fact that he's perjuring himself on that is revealing that he understands that reliance on the Steele dossier defies logic. It's a good question, though. Yeah, I understand that, but like, you know, it has to be rooted in something. To say, I'm just going to disregard everything that we have, everything we know now. All right, look, he can try and make that claim. That now becomes a question of fact for a jury to come to a conclusion on. I'm talking about surviving scrutiny from a court as to whether or not these charges would ever be allowed to proceed. You want to try and make that claim? Okay. You can make the claim. And I agree with you that ultimately, whatever assessment is coming from his best staffers is not the final determination. We're voting for the president to make the decision. But when they come back and say, you don't need for him to, he can decide what's credible without saying, I'm going to have you write a different report than what Trump was going to see. Where is the harm in letting Trump see the actual report that was prepared on December 8th? Why would you shelve that? What's the motive? What's the possible good faith reason for shelving that? You can say, hey, look, I see what you did December 8th. I hate it. It sucks. You should have had more reliance on the Steele dossier. I think you're wrong and whatever. There should have been more of an assessment there. Okay. If it's being done openly in front of Trump rather than behind closed doors, he is the president-elect. There's a transition that's supposed to be happening here. We're keeping him informed. So it's the fact that he's trying to keep Trump uninformed. It's not what he's personally deciding is more credible. It's the wrongful act is what he is purposefully trying to shield from Trump, which doesn't have any justifiable logical basis to be shielding it from him. You see what I'm saying? I think you're asking great questions here, Joe. I think that these are great points that I agree with in large part. And I won't even qualify with in large part. I'll just say I agree with that. He does determine what is credible. But you still have to ask yourself, okay, so they can come in with the daily press briefing that they prepare on December 8th. And then he would say, I think your findings here suck. I disagree with you. But why are you stopping them from coming forward with the press briefing and saying, no, I need to have a press briefing that says something completely different? That doesn't seem to make any sense.
The production of this intelligence community assessment was subject to unusual directives directly from the president and senior political appointees, especially the former director of the CIA, John Brennan.
I see that CW rated me over in the ghetto. So I say, thank you, CW. Great call. Awesome. Thank you, brother. Or sister. There's a sunflower there.
The House Intelligence Committee Oversight Report also shows how later that same day, on December 9th, Brennan ordered the publication of quote-unquote substandard reporting on Russian activities, which had previously been withheld from publication of prior assessments.
And this is a finding, again, by Schiff's committee, that Obama ordered substandard reporting. This is not Trump's conclusion. This is not Tulsi Gabbard's conclusion. These are conclusions made by Adam Schiff's committee.
Because the information was judged, quote, to have not met longstanding publication standards. Some of the information later used in the Obama-ordered assessment over the objections of veteran CIA officers was, quote unquote, unclear or from unknown sources. The Intelligence Committee's oversight report reveals that CIA Director Brennan overruled senior CIA officers who challenged.
I agree with you. Adam Schiff is a big fat liar, but he's consistently lied in ways that harm Trump. So his lying has a purpose to it. He's not like that guy sitting on. He's not that guy who's sitting on at the crossroads where there's two guys, you know, that old riddle. They say if you're walking down a road and you come to a fork in the road, and sitting at the fork are two guys. One of them always tells the truth. One of them always lies. He's not the guy that always lies that way. He's the guy that always lies to try and help the DNC, help every Democrat. And likely few Democrats he'd want to help more than Obama. And these are assessments that he made about what Obama did. So it's not a, so even though I agree with you, the guy is completely dishonest, he would be completely dishonest in a way that favors Obama. So if this guy who would lie to cover for Obama is actually exposing Obama, it's that much more powerful.
The Obama ordered intelligence assessment, stating, quote, "We don't have direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected." Yet, the Obama-directed assessment was published on January 6, 2017, which explicitly stated, quote, "We assess Putin and the Russian government aspired to help President-elect Trump's election chances, when possible, by discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorably to him." End of quote. The CIA and
that was a lying quote, another potential fraud right there. Another crime right there, part of your RICO charge.
FBI, then led by John Brennan and James Comey, expressed high confidence in this judgment, while the NSA expressed moderate confidence. Yet, as the report we released today shows, the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, did not cite any report where Putin indicated helping Trump win was an objective. The opposite is true.
They had no reports that Russia wanted to help Trump win. And yet he had his intelligence committee go out there and tell everyone that that's what they wanted.
With regards to the Steele dossier, we now know that one of the source documents that the Obama administration used in the creation of this intelligence assessment in January of 2017 was none other than the discredited, unverified Steele dossier. The House Intel report states, quote, "Contradicting public claims by then CIA Director Brennan that the dossier was not in any way incorporated into this intelligence assessment. The dossier was referenced in the intelligence assessment's main body text and further detailed in a 2-page assessment annex."
Flat out lie, flat out perjury, flat out lie. I'll tell you right now, Brennan should lawyer up hard. And I hope he has a pardon, because I want those pardons shot down. I hope he has a pardon. Just arrived. Sorry, late, sir. Did you see what Bill O'Reilly said about Schiff today? I did not see that. No, I wasn't even sure Bill O'Reilly's still alive. So, not that I have any problems with him. I'm glad to hear he's still breathing.
John Brennan lied, and he denied using this dossier in this intelligence assessment that President Obama ordered because he knew it was discredited. It was a politically motivated, manufactured document. He directed senior CIA officials to use it anyway. CIA told...
So he directed them to use a discredited report in order to reach their findings. This is... Can we vote as far as civil class action on Obama? For fraud? It'd be doubtful. It would probably be dismissed. That's the sort of thing that gets quickly dismissed. For the record, I think Barack is guilty of sin. Just don't see how POTUS judgment doesn't free him of it. And that's what I'm saying is this is not a matter of his judgment. When he has people saying this is what he can say, I disagree with an assessment. That doesn't give him license to say my intelligence community reaches these conclusions when that's not what they're reaching. He can act based on saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, and you're wrong. I agree with you that he's free there. But for him to basically say, no, you're going to write something completely the opposite and rely on things that are discredited and claim that we have high confidence that this is what's said, at that point, it's manifestly wrongful. And I appreciate that you're playing devil's advocate here, which is the healthiest way to try to approach the viability. And what you're saying is likely the arguments that we should anticipate hearing from his counsel. This is something what Joe is bringing up here is a pretty good foreshadow of what we should anticipate his lawyers claiming. I'm trying to present the counter argument to that.
The House Intelligence Committee staff, as they investigated this, quote, the director of the CIA, John Brennan, refused to remove it. And when confronted with the dossier's many flaws, responded, quote, yes, but doesn't it ring true?
So when his own folks are telling him this is so deeply flawed, and he's like, yeah, but it sounds good. It sounds good. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Even the bipartisan Senate Select Committee on Intelligence report published in 2020 criticized the FBI's handling of the Steele dossier, noting its completely unverified nature and purposeful sidestepping of intelligence community procedures in its use. Now, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, including their mouthpieces in the media, knowingly lied as they repeated the contrived narrative that was created in this January 2017 intelligence community assessment with high confidence as though it were fact. John Brennan, as CIA director, stated in a memo,
I do not think his pardons are legally viable. I've talked about the pardons in the past, and this is one of the things. It's a good time since I brought up the pardons, and you're bringing it up here in your super chat, Worcestershire. I'll tell you that the effectiveness to the pardons to date, for the most pardons, certainly the pardons that are these blanket pardons, their effectiveness has been in keeping prosecutors from pressing charges. You can never be convicted of something that a prosecutor refuses to prosecute. They have the final say on whether or not they're going to go forward. And if they recognize the pardon as being valid and say, well, I'm not going to prosecute because there's a pardon there, in that case, you never get convicted. And everyone just goes on thinking you're pardoned. And it's a valid pardon. The only way we know whether a blanket pardon, which means a pardon on all activities related to X, no matter what the crime may be, what crimes I may know of, what crimes I may not know of, they're all pardoned. I do not think that that is part of the president's pardon power. His pardon power is plenary in that he has the authority to say, I understand that you were convicted of murdering 400,000 people. I am pardoning you for that. That is how broad it is. No matter how terrible and evil, I understand that you just destroyed the Eastern Seaboard and killed millions of people. I'm pardoning you because his decision to pardon is unquestioned. But he cannot say, I'm pardoning you. He has to pardon him from a crime, not just say, I'm pardoning you from all crimes, because he has to know what crimes he's pardoning in order for it to be a valid pardon. That's what I would argue. And that's why, if in fact there are pardons, or just say all crimes related to Operation Crossfire Hurricane, that I think that if you can't tell us what the crimes are, I don't think that that's a valid pardon. Now, it might stop a prosecutor from proceeding, but if a prosecutor says, I don't think that's a valid pardon, then it would come down to what a court says. Is this a valid type of pardon or not? And we won't really know what the law is unless it ultimately works its way up to the Supreme Court. And they decide, is that the power that he has? I believe that you have the plenary power of the pardon that is given to the president, try saying that 3 times fast, is to forgive the sin, not to forgive the man. They can forgive the sin, the man of committing the sin, but not to pardon the man. This man caused this sin I can pardon for that sin, and for that sin, and for that sin, and for a million sins, as long as I know what the sins are. Not to say, I pardon you, and now everything about you is whitewashed. That's a very different type of pardon that I do not think is in the president's arsenal. But I'd love to see it litigated. And so, for example, with respect to Hunter Biden, I think that this broad pardon he gave him for 10 years, anything he's done, I think that would work for the crimes he was charged with, because those are at least known or could be known by the president, as opposed to if this guy was distributing crack and caused fentanyl deaths of 500,000 teens, and he has no idea that he's pardoning him from that. It seems ludicrous. It seems ludicrous to say that he's actually pardoned. I mean, think about that for a second. Because afterwards, the president come back and be like, oh my God, I didn't know he did that. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make any sense at all.
To his agency staff in December of 2016, saying, quote, there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. This was reported by NBC News, confirming.
What do you want me to go into it? If you ask me, I think that the document they ultimately found was probably manufactured. They conveniently find something years later. I think it was conveniently manufactured. Okay, what are you want to? This is talking about his fake birth certificate is the ultimate spilt milk. And the only thing it can do is to serve to make you look like someone who's very bitter that he was president. It doesn't do anything. So what's the point?
That Brennan, along with James Clapper and James Comey, agreed with the CIA's assessment that Russia intervened to help Trump win the presidency.
You're not getting reparations.
As Obama's director of national intelligence, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January of 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette.
Hold on a second. What did you just say? Come back to your question in a second, Fuzzing Dragon. Let me hear that one more time from her.
As Obama's director of national intelligence, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January of 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette, he talked about how he provided Trump with the same class that President Obama received, which included the high confidence judgment that Putin directly ordered the hacking and election interference. Clapper then went on to add, I think they, the Russians, actually influenced the outcome. This is a brief summary of the details that you'll find within the House Majority Staff's report in their investigation into the Obama-directed January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment. That leads us to the very same conclusion that we announced in the release of our documents on Friday. The implications of this are far-reaching and have to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. It has to do with an outgoing president taking action to manufacture intelligence, to undermine and usurp the will of the American people in that election, and launch what would be a years-long coup against the incoming president of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you.
Very, very powerful. If you came in late, which I think many of you probably did, I excuse you. I pardon you. I pardon you. And my diggers are gonna be like building up, like making me look like a commandant of a camp. I pardon you. I'm gonna come back to the next part of that, but I just I'll give you a synopsis as to what she said here that she wrote out afterwards. She said, lie, Putin and the Russian government helped Trump win the 2016 election. Truth, President Obama, former director of CIA John Brennan, and others fabricated the Russia hoax, suppressed intelligence showing Putin was preparing for a Clinton victory, manufactured findings from shoddy sources, disobeyed internet intelligence community standards, and knowingly lied to the American people. Lie, the fabricated Steele dossier was not used as a source in the Obama administration's January 2017 intelligence community assessment of the November 2016 election. Truth, not only did CIA Director Brennan, FBI Director Comey, DNI Clapper, and others include the Steele dossier in the 2017 ICA, they overruled senior intel officials who warned them it was fabricated and should not be used. Lie. The Obama administration's January ICA was an independent intelligence community product produced with apolitical analysis. Truth. Obama ordered the intelligence community to create an intelligence community assessment that he knew was false, promoting a contrived narrative with the intent of undermining the legitimacy and power of a duly elected president of the United States, Donald Trump. Together, the ODNI records released on Friday, the Justice Department's June 2018 report known as the Clinton Annex, released earlier this week, and the House Intel Oversight Report we released today confirm what many Americans have known. The Russia hoax was a lie that was knowingly created by the Obama administration to undermine the legitimacy and power of the duly elected president of the United States, Donald Trump. That is a synopsis of what she dropped today, which is potentially shattering, and could lead to criminal prosecution. That's your synopsis there. And again, if you join late, to me, I think the best way to go after him and all of them is with RICO. Now, RICO, in case you're unfamiliar with what that is, RICO is racketeering, influence, and corruption. Organization. So it's basically, in order to establish RICO, what you have to show is that there's a criminal enterprise, which is a group of people who are looking to engage in a series of crimes over a particular period of time and sharing a common objective in that. The crimes that I outlaid for you were included that he wanted to basically obstruct justice and defraud the United States of America, just defraud the people. The statutes which are relating to this are 18 U.S.C. 371, which is conspiracy to defraud the United States, 18 U.S.C. 1001, which is making false statements, potentially 18 U.S.C. 1343, which would be wire fraud, and obstruction under 1512. So those are and if you're looking to hide behind the statute of limitations, I think that the statements made by Brennan, which were overt acts and illegal, certainly with respect to, were all actions that were taken designed to help cover up the fraud that they committed. That wasn't the only time that he did it within the last 5 years. Here's another example of John Brennan. This is going back to, this was Brennan in 2018. What I showed you was in 2023. Here's Brennan in 2018 on an interview making the same complete crap claims.
When did you first learn of the so-called Steele dossier and what Christopher Steele was doing?
Well, it was not a very well-kept secret among press circles for several months before it came out. And it was in late summer of 2016 when there were some individuals from the various U.S. news outlets who asked me about my familiarity with it. And I had heard just snippets about it. I did not know what was in there. I did not see it until later in that year. I think it was in December. But I was unaware of the provenance of it as well as what was in it. And it did not play any role whatsoever in the intelligence community assessment that was done, that was presented to then President Obama and then President-elect Trump.
No role. No role at all. Well, Adam Schiff says he's a liar. Adam Schiff's select committee says he's lying. Oh my God. Oh my God. As JD Vance writes here, Steele dossier was used by Brennan and others to cook the intelligence assessments on the Russia collusion hoax. This really is a major scandal. He's right. It is. So I wanted to cover this. I want to go back into. Oh, okay. So that's the question a lot of people should be asking. As I said in the very beginning here, you bring this into DC, you're just wasting your time and you're putting on a dog and pony show. There is no point to bringing this in DC. I mentioned yesterday that because Trump v. USA, the case that's defining presidential immunity, is so open to the individual interpretation of a judge, that if you get it in DC, where every judge there is willing to get down on their knees and lick whatever part of Barack Obama he asked them to lick, there is absolutely no point to bringing that charge there, because undoubtedly they will say presidential immunity everywhere. And they'll say this was all official acts, all official acts, all official acts, all official acts, and toss out the case. They will also likely make it very difficult for you to prosecute any of his cronies. So I agree with you. Best alternative is to try and find a reason to get it brought down to Florida. And the most glaring reason to have it brought in Florida would be that if you can establish, and this requires facts that I cannot verify to be true, but seem likely true. If you can establish that there was this continuation of their crimes in Florida, I think that, and you can make the case that he, was residing in Florida at the time, and he was the direct that Trump was residing in Florida. If you can get this down to Florida, I think you'll have a fair shot there. Not simply with respect to the judge, but also ultimately a jury, because in DC, no DC jury would ever convict Barack Obama of anything. So.
And the Constitution to be thoroughly investigated and held accountable. And it's been 10 years of this. And I would just add, based on everything the director has said and declassified, all of you in this room should go through it and take a look at this report and review the intelligence, because unfortunately that hasn't happened. And many of the people who perpetuated this hoax, Clapper, Andy McCabe, James Comey, and many others, have been hired by major networks in this room to go on television and continue to spew these lies, knowing that they are lies. And if you all recall, just
go after the media too. Go after the media, the ones who knew.
Flashback to 2016 and the years after,
they were all complicit. They were all, there's a lot of names. We're talking about the big name known, big circle folks. Mark Warner is another person who potentially could be named. This indictment can have dozens of people.
Trump won presidency was embroiled in this scandal
God
that was
bless
perpetuated
you.
by the Democrat
Welcome.
Party. And you had major Democrat Party officials in this city, namely Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, who went on television and told the American people Donald Trump is an asset of Russia. It was a lie. They always knew it. So Hillary Clinton herself said that President Trump would be a puppet for Putin. Senator Tim Kaine at the time called President Trump Vladimir Putin's defense lawyer. Adam Schiff stated, and one of the worst things a lot
That crazy bitch Clinton went on and saying, I still think I would have won if not for Russian interference, Russian FBI interference. She was saying that 2 years ago. That bitter, crazy bitch.
Lawmaker can do is to tell the American people, I know something you don't know. It's just classified and I can't tell you. And that's what he said. I can tell you that the case is more than that. I can't go into the particulars, but there's more than circumstantial evidence now. And not enough people in this room, not enough journalists in this country pushed Adam Schiff to say, what are you talking about? What evidence do you have? Everybody just ran with the lies, and it led to impeachments. It led to the division of our country. Unfortunately, so many Americans, from listening to outlets in this room, believed in these lies. And it's a complete scam, and it's a scandal, and the president wants to see accountability for that. Phil.
Thank you. A question for Director Gabbard. A spokesperson for former President Obama said in a statement earlier this week, quote, "Nothing in the documents issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes." How do you respond to critics?
Oh, so I wanted to actually wanted to go to the beginning of this. I was pulling up the wrong clip. I want to go to the beginning. This is the question and answer session, and there's a lot of good questions here and good answers. So I think it's important for us to go through this part.
Has time for this topic. She will leave. I'm happy to take questions on other matters after that. But if anyone has questions for Director Gabbard, you're welcome to ask them. We'll start with our new media seat as always. Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. And Director Gabbard, this one is for you. Do you believe that any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former
The
President
evidence,
Obama?
correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment. There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact.
Ed, go ahead.
Director Gabbard, thank you. So just to...
TX47 says, had the United States Central Intelligence Agency as a corrupt and criminal organization, the entire Southern Hemisphere laughs out loud, rolling on the floor, laughing until they all pass out. This is true. This is true. This whole story has made the left spend all day screaming Epstein, 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 Epstein.
Two questions, but to begin on that. The president yesterday, you've inferred that the former president helped lead a coup. Based on what you now see, do you believe President Obama is guilty of treason?
That's a fair question. Trump kept saying treason. Do you think that he's guilty of treason?
Leaving the criminal charges to the Department of Justice. I am not an attorney, but as I've said previously, when you look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments that were created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and a treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration.
So it's not legally treason, as the term treason is defined by federal statutes. It is treason, but from a lawyer perspective, which she's admitting she's not a lawyer, so that's why she's leaving that up to the DOJ. So when Trump speaks colloquially, I understand why he says treason, and I have no problem with him using that term. But as far as it being an actual charge, that's not under the law what the law defines as being treason.
Intelligence Committee spent several years looking into this and unanimously agreed in a bipartisan fashion. Secretary of State Rubio was a member of that committee, that there was
Now they're quoting Obama. He's quoting Obama here.
no political interference. There was a years-long Justice Department investigation into this as well that also concluded no political interference. So help us from a 50,000-foot level explain, what do you now have that refutes those two?
Sure.
That's a very reasonable question. I'm glad he asked that question.
I will encourage you, in my role as the Director of National Intelligence, my job, again, as I said when I came into this role, was to make sure that we are telling the truth to the American people and that we are ensuring that the intelligence community is not being politicized. So I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you and the media to conduct honest journalism, and the American people.
I'm asking you to conduct honest media, and while you're at it, I'll give you a slightly less difficult challenge for you. I'm gonna ask you to please build me a castle in the clouds. They can't engage in honest reporting. If they did, they'd be incriminating themselves.
To see for yourself in the documents that we've released now, close to 200 pages that point in multiple references, multiple examples to include comments that have been made by senior intelligence professionals who are some still working within these agencies today that confirm the conclusions that we have drawn, that President Obama directed an intelligence community assessment to be created to further this contrived false narrative that ultimately led to a years-long coup to try to undermine President Trump's presidency.
And it's your belief
John,
that
go
those
ahead.
two previous investigations missed that or covered it up?
I'm telling you to look at the evidence. Look at the evidence and you will know the truth.
John.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Director Gabbard.
Now she's asking them to do homework. She's asking them to do homework.
You declassified these documents, if I'm not mistaken, Friday of last week, correct?
We released them on Friday of last week, the first tranche, yes.
This isn't the first time that President Trump has been president of the United States. He was president from 2017 to 2021. Couldn't the prior DNI under President Trump have declassified these documents? And why didn't that DNI do that at that time?
That's a fair question. These are actually reasonable questions, which they should have answers for. You know, this all happened in 2016, 2017. Why are you waiting until his second term to declassify this stuff?
I can't speak to what happened there. There were several DNIs under the first Trump administration. President Trump faced many challenges,
including a Russia collusion hoax. Why didn't he expose the Russia collusion? Because he was kind of green and he was dealing with ridiculous challenges. There was Russia collusion hoax. There was the first indictment. There was COVID. There was a lot going on. Were you here?
from those who were working in the government who sought to undermine his presidency. That's been clearly detailed. What I can speak to is the fact that this was one of the first things that we started to investigate here within this Trump administration and have released the results upon the conclusion of our investigation.
And then my second question has to do with what intelligence agencies around the world have said about Russia, that they have tried to influence elections in the United States, in France, in Germany, in the UK. Do you disagree with that? Do you believe that Russia is a bad actor as it relates to trying to influence elections?
I think that's a great question. That's a great question. That's a very reasonable question.
I'll point back to the intelligence that President Trump has ordered declassified, that we have declassified and released, that the intelligence reflects Russia's motives were to try to sow discord and chaos within the U.S. election, which is a clear distinction from showing a preference for or against a specific candidate, which is what the Obama manufactured intelligence document alleges, that Russia.
And that's an even better answer. I'm not saying that they're not trying to subvert elections. I'm simply saying the point I've been making this morning is they weren't trying to help Trump win. And that was how Obama was trying to subvert and engage in fraud on the American people by having his intelligence community lie about what their own findings were.
Russia preferred Donald Trump and tried to help Donald Trump get elected. Again, going back to the most important point here, with the intent to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump's election and therefore subvert the will of the American people who chose to send him to the White House.
Reagan. Thanks, Caroline. Dr. Gabbard, Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. You laid out that the documents revealed that the Obama administration did not publish a December 2016 presidential daily briefing that demonstrated that Russia did not steal the election. Trump was receiving these briefings at the time because he was president-elect. Are you of the view that that information was kept out of the briefing because then President-elect Donald Trump would have seen it?
Good question. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So you're saying that the reason it was kept out of the PDB was so that Trump wouldn't see it?
I don't have any documents that speak to exactly what the new guidance was that was given as the reason for pulling that document, which, by the way, still has never been published until we released it last week, Friday. One could assume that they didn't want President Trump to see a document that came from the intelligence community that would contradict the Russia hoax narrative that began through the Hillary Clinton campaign with the Steele dossier.
One more, maybe either for you or Caroline. The president said yesterday that Obama committed treason. Do you or the White House believe that the Supreme Court's immunity decision protects Obama from prosecution?
Look, I can speak to.
That's kind of a stupid question because neither of these people are attorneys. So that's kind of a dumb question.
The president's feelings on this matter. He spoke to all of you yesterday in the Oval Office, but I also spoke to him about this morning. And he wants to see all those who perpetuated this fraud against our country, who betrayed our country and the Constitution, to be thoroughly investigated and held accountable. And it's been 10 years of this. And I would just add, based on everything the director has said and declassified, all of you in this room should go through it and take a look at this report and review the intelligence, because unfortunately that hasn't happened. And many of the people who perpetuated this hoax, Clapper, Andy McCabe, James Comey, and many others, have been hired by major networks in this room to go on television and continue to spew these lies, knowing that they are lies. And if you all recall, just flashback to 2016 and the years after, the entire Trump 1 presidency was embroiled in this scandal that was perpetuated by the Democrat Party. And you had major Democrat Party officials in this city, namely Adam Schiff, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, who went on television and told the American people Donald Trump is an asset of Russia. It was a lie. They always knew it. So Hillary Clinton herself said that President Trump would be a puppet for Putin. Senator Tim Kaine at the time called President Trump Vladimir Putin's defense lawyer. Adam Schiff stated, and one of the worst things a lawmaker can do is to tell the American people, I know something you don't know, it's just classified and I can't tell you. And that's what he said. I can tell you that the case is more than that. I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. And not enough people in this room, not enough journalists in this country pushed Adam Schiff to say, what are you talking about? What evidence do you have? Everybody just ran with the lies, and it led.
And he more than anyone knew that was a lie, because he was overseeing the select committee, which was putting out this report.
To impeachments. It led to the division of our country. Unfortunately, so many Americans, from listening to outlets in this room, believed in these lies. And it's a complete scam, and it's a scandal. And the president wants to see accountability for that. Phil.
Thank you. A question for Director Gabbard. A spokesperson for former President Obama said in a statement earlier this week, quote, nothing in the documents issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. How do you respond to critics like former President Obama and also others on the Hill who
Well, Schiff said you're wrong. They weren't looking to do that.
say that the administration is conflating apples and oranges here, conflating allegations of actual hacking of voter machines and allegations of interference generally?
I think it's a disservice to the American people that former President Obama's office and others who are criticizing the transparency that is being delivered by releasing these documents. They are doing a disservice to the American people and trying to deflect away from their culpability in what is a historic scandal and negative action towards the American people and our democratic republic. The answer to that statement can very clearly be found throughout all of the documents that we have released. Again, showing that Russia has took action to try to sow discord in the election, but showed no preference for or against any singular candidate.
You've long been an opponent of weaponization in government. How do you respond to criticism that referring Obama administration officials and even potentially the former president is just more weaponization, and this is a potential race to the bottom?
More weaponization? That dude who weaponized the IRS against his political opponents is crying like a whiny little bitch about weaponization because he's been caught engaging in illegal activity? That is, I would call that confession through projection.
I think that's a very disrespectful attack on the American people who deserve the truth. They deserve to have faith and trust in the integrity of our democratic republic, which has been undermined by President Obama through his direction of this manufactured fake intelligence document, knowing that it was filled with lies and knowing that it would and could then be used for all of the actions that came after.
And I would just add, there needs to be accountability for that weaponization, Phil, that we've seen. And no one has been a victim of the weaponized government more than President Trump, not just because of this political scandal. You all recall his house was raided. So I think, it's very disingenuous for people to say, how dare they speak of former President Obama about this based on evidence and based on intelligence, when the former president of the United States, Donald Trump's home was raided when he was
Get my name out your mouth.
Forced to sit in a Manhattan courtroom and many other courtrooms across the country for crimes he never committed when he was impeached and indicted, and the entire country witnessed that. That's the weaponization of justice. Now the president is back because the American people see the truth. Nearly 80 million Americans reelected him back to this office, and he believes that we need to have justice and accountability. And I think the nearly 80 million Americans who reelected him agree with that. Caitlin.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions for Director Gabbard just on this. Director Gabbard, you referenced the past intelligence reports and assessments on this, including that 2017 one that was signed off, as Ed noted, by every Republican on the Senate Intelligence Community, including the acting chair of the time, now Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who said in a statement that they did not find any evidence of Russian collusion, but they did find, however, is very troubling, and they found irrefutable evidence of Russian meddling. One, are you saying that he's wrong in that statement that he made then? And secondly, what would you say to people who believe that you're only releasing these documents now to improve your standing with the president after he said that your intelligence assessments were wrong?
Well, first, I want to correct something that you stated, which was citing the Senate Intelligence Committee's report as being one and the same. I think you said the intelligence community. The Senate Intelligence Committee has a very different function than the Office of the Director of National Intelligence.
So you're conflating things because you're kind of an idiot and you're getting confused between the executive branch and the legislative branch. See, the Congressional Select Committee, their findings are not the same right there as when you have an intelligence community assessment. But I'll let Tulsi explain to what's that woman's name? She's that CNN chick. You all know her name.
The evidence and the intelligence that has been declassified and released is irrefutable. I'm going to let Caroline speak to Secretary Rubio.
I'll speak to both questions. First, on Secretary Rubio, he put out a statement in 2020 following that Senate Intelligence Committee report, and he said what they found is troubling. We found irrefutable evidence of Russian meddling, which the Director of National Intelligence just confirmed for all of you, that Russia was trying to sow distrust and chaos. But what's the outrage in this that Secretary Rubio did not say at the time, the Democrats were saying at the time, is the fact that the intelligence community was concocting this narrative that the president colluded with the Russians, that the president's son was holding secret meetings with the Russians, all of these lies that were never true. And he also said at that time, we discovered deeply troubling actions taken by the FBI under Comey, particularly their acceptance and willingness to rely on the Steele dossier without verifying its methodology or sourcing. The Steele dossier that many outlets in this room ran as the gospel truth, and it was cooked up and paid for by the Clinton campaign. As for your second question, Caitlin, I think who is saying that she would release this to try to boost her standing with the president? Who has said that?
Well, the president has publicly undermined her when it came to Iran. He said she was wrong. He told me that she didn't know what she was talking about. That was on Air Force One on camera.
The only people who are suggesting that the Director of National Intelligence would release evidence to try to boost her standing with the president are the people in this room who constantly try to sow distrust and chaos amongst the president's cabinet. And it is not working.
It's only you lying bitches, Caitlin. It's only you lying bitches who are making that claim. Is that really true? That's fascinating. They probably recognize it's an expletive. That's probably what it is. You can't say other four-letter words also.
I will just answer your question directly. I am with the President of the United States every day. He has the utmost confidence in Director Gabbard. He always has. He continues to. And that is true of his entire cabinet, who is all working as one team to deliver on the promises this president made. Does anyone else have questions for Director Gabbard? And then we'll turn it over to a couple other questions. Christian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Director Gabbard, two follow-ups on questions that have been asked. You mentioned the previous DNIs during the president's first term. One of them reports to you right now, if I'm not mistaken, John Ratcliffe. So have you not spoken to him about why this information was not declassified during the first term?
He was in that position for a very short period of time. The work that began back then, we have picked up and absolutely completed. We are continuing to investigate this. Additional whistleblowers are now coming forward because they see an opportunity for the truth to come to light. And as Caroline said, for real accountability to be brought forward. The accountability is the essential part of this. We can show the truth, reveal the truth. The accountability needs to occur to be able to start to restore that trust in the integrity of our democracy.
And then just quickly, I know you said you would leave the charging to DOJ, but the statute of limitations on conspiracy is 5 years. So what else could they possibly pursue besides treason?
Idiot. 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 It's continuing conspiracy. It's continuing when he goes in there and perjures himself. It's a continuing conspiracy. Indeed, both of them are amazing.
I think that's a great question for Attorney General Pam Bondi. We're providing all of the evidence, all of the intelligence that we have, both redacted and unredacted versions, referring it to the Department of Justice and the FBI.
We'll take one more. Charlie, go ahead.
How credible was the information about Hillary Clinton's power from you? The report said that it was from sourced from the DNC. Have you seen that information? Do you think that maybe Russia was overemphasizing what they had?
All I have seen is what the Intelligence Committee have reported through their investigation. I think the underlying point there is that we understand from intelligence what Russia said that they had. And the important point here is that if they were trying to influence the election, as President Obama and James Clapper and John Brennan, everybody said they were doing in order to support Donald Trump's election, they would have released the most damning of that information, some of which I detailed here. You'll find the rest in the report prior to the election to help Donald Trump win. They specifically
that's a great point that I hadn't thought of. Yes, your whole claim that Putin was trying to help Trump win is undercut by the fact that they withheld information they had that was damaging to Clinton. So you knew it was crap. You knew your whole thing was crap. It shows that you knowingly lied to the American people. Great job there, Tulsi.
held what they had on her, the most damning information, because they thought that she would win the election. They had plans to release it just prior to her inauguration to, again, sow discord and chaos in America.
And if I may, on Jeffrey Epstein, can you rule out that he was connected in some way to any kind of intelligence, either foreign or domestic?
I haven't seen any evidence or information that reflects that. If anything comes before me that changes that in any way, support the president's statement loud and clear. If any credible evidence comes forward, he wants the American people to see it.
Great. Director Gabbard, we thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy woman, so we'll let you get out of here. But
when you see these two women do their thing, you understand why it is that people kind of get very annoyed and frustrated with Pam Bondi, because that is where her weakness is in trying to present herself with any kind of poise. She's very, very poor at that. She's very, very poor at that. I'll tell you that no one on the left wanted to talk about Epstein. No one wants to talk about Epstein, but now that's all the left can talk about. Wall Street Journal today came out with a report claiming that Justice Department told Trump in May that his name is among many in the Epstein files. So this would explain why, if there's also a clip. I think I have this. Did I save this clip of Mike Johnson? I think I might have it. Let me see if I pull it up here. Is this Mike Johnson? No, that's Mark Warner. I don't think I took it. Mike Johnson was speculating that to a reporter. I didn't end up taking this clip, but he was speculating to a reporter that there was false information put in by the last DOJ or the Biden DOJ wherein they were falsifying reports and leaving them behind for Trump's team to find when they got there. So Bondi also told President at the meeting that Justice decided to not release more Jeffrey Epstein documents because of the presence of child porn and the need to protect victims, which that's the stupidest thing. When Justice Department officials, I'm not going to go through this whole article, but when Justice Department officials reviewed what Attorney General Pam Bondi called a truckload of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein earlier this year, they discovered Donald Trump's name appeared multiple times, according to senior administration officials. In May, Bondi and a deputy informed the president, see, this is the Wall Street Journal trying to tell you, see, he's guilty. See, he's guilty. At a meeting in the White House that his name was in the Epstein files, the official said many other high-profile figures were also named. Trump was told being mentioned in the records isn't a sign of wrongdoing. This is their covering this is their way of trying to cover themselves from a lawsuit. The officials said it was routine briefing that covered a number of topics and that Trump's appearance in documents wasn't the focus. They told the president at the meeting that the files contained what officials felt was unverified hearsay about many people, including Trump, who had socialized with Epstein in the past, some of the officials said. One of the officials familiar with the documents said they contain hundreds of other names. They also told Trump that senior Justice Department officials didn't plan to release any more documents related to the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein because the material contained child porn and victims' personal information, the official said. Trump said at the meeting he would defer to the Justice Department's decision to not release any further files, which I do think he likely would have told them, I don't want you to take more files. Legally, Blondie, Ditcher, and Recess appoint Gates. Gates seems kind of loony late also. But typically, the FBI doesn't disclose materials that aren't related to a charged offense. This is another fake news story, just like the previous story by the Wall Street Journal to White House Communications Director Stephen Chung. So that's where they're running. They're running to we don't want to talk about that anymore. Let's focus on Epstein, because we're very, very uncomfortable talking about Obama. There's not much good news for them in talking about Obama. I mentioned to you John Brennan earlier, and I said in 2023, he testified to Congress and committed perjury. Here's another smoking gun to help relate us back to 2016, because even 7 years later, they were still trying to cover their tracks. In 2023, John Brennan testified to Congress where he denied to Matt Gaetz that the Steele dossier was included in the 2016 ICA on Russian meddling and that he wasn't involved in even analyzing it. Tulsi Gabbard's latest release shows that not only was it directly cited, but that Brennan et al. Overruled senior intel officials who warned them it was garbage. Here is the back and forth, his transcript from that perjury that Brennan committed. All right, so the fact that the DNC was providing the financing for the Steele dossier's development doesn't give you concern that I might be partisan? You can almost hear Matt Gaetz saying this, right? Again, that was happening back in 2016. Again, I understand how you're able to tie this to my reference to my expertise, but I don't see any relevance to the Hunter Biden laptop issue now. Well, you said that you signed this letter that we now acknowledge Joe Biden misused in a debate to fool the American public because you're this great Russia expert. So I'm trying to understand your Russia expertise, and you were involved in analyzing this information? No, I was not involved in analyzing the dossier at all. I said the first time I actually saw it was after the election. And the CIA was not involved at all with the dossier. You can direct that to the FBI and to others. Were you aware of the FBI's involvement with the dossier? Yes, because there's an annex in the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, that the Bureau asked to be included in there. It was their purview, their area, not ours. So, yeah, these are problems. These are problems for the conspirators, for this criminal enterprise. These are problems that they have. And that's what I got for you tonight. All in all, I think I gave you more than you could have possibly hoped for, right? I mean, I think so. I think that's a fair way of looking at this. Tomorrow, I expect to be back in locals at goodlogic.locals.com. That's goodlogic.locals.com. But if you missed the whole show, I can surmise it this way. I think we can get RICO. I think we can get past the statute of limitations issue. It's no point to bringing this if it's in D.C. You have to get this down to Florida somehow, which could be challenging. I'm not going to kid you. I can do that. I can address that. So you definitely want to make sure that you're going to get this down in Florida, because if it's not in Florida, I don't even understand what the point. I don't understand what the point would be. In DC, there's absolutely no point at all. And I do think that the presidential immunity defense would work perfectly for him for Obama, if in fact it's in DC. But I walked through how some of the most egregious activity he engaged in, even if it gets qualified as an official act and has a rebuttable presumption of being I'm not seeing it here, Jim. I'm trying to find it. I'm not seeing it. This is annoying. That even if there's a rebuttable presumption that indeed the presumption of immunity will be rebutted, because I think under Blasingame, the steps that he's taking are manifestly wrongful. And if it's manifestly wrongful activity, even if it's an official act, there's no immunity. So you don't need to look into his motivations. You can just look at, hey, what good faith reason would someone have to lie or mislead the incoming president-elect about the intelligence community's assessment? Why would you be lying to them about that? Why would you be misleading the incoming president? What possible way could that be anything other than a wrongful act? I think it's a tough question for him to try and answer. I think it's a very, very tough question for him to try and answer. I'm going to try and find it here. It is live.
The Russians hacked Russia hacking.
Sorry about that. Trying to figure out how to redirect, and I was struggling with that. Come on. Any other questions? Yeah, I see what you're giving me there. There it is. All right. It's done. I'm kind of sore. So I'm going to wrap up over here. I'm going to remind you all, my friends, lamb meat, they, them, definitely not you. Like, definitely not you. It's for they, them. And most importantly, do not eat the bug. Don't do it. Don't eat the bugs. Have a good night, everyone. And Godspeed.